How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Yud Aleph, Daf 11 of Masechta Sotah. Friends. Okay, what can I tell you about Daf Yud Aleph? Daf Yud Aleph is Geschmack. Very Geschmack. All Agadita. What's interesting is that we now start a few days of Agadita about Egypt. About the Jews in Mitzrayim, which is very interesting because, of course, right now it's Pesach time, and we have these gewaldige, famous gemaras about the Yidden in Mitzrayim, or the Bnei Yisrael in Mitzrayim. It's a very large daf, so I imagine it's going to take some time. It reminds me of like Tainus, and those gemaras, big pages, but very, very interesting. Very, very interesting stuff. Also, we have some work to do on Daf Yud Amud Beis. So yeah, we better get cracking over here. Okay, so we're going to start in Daf Yud Amud Beis. The first wide line, the first of the widest lines on Daf Yud Amud Beis. I think that's what we got up to. Sure hope so. Avshalom is goye b'sayir v'chulei. Oh, so it says the Gemara that Avshalom he was very into his hair, and then his hair was his downfall. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis thought Avshalom b'sayir morat, that Avshalom rebelled with his hair. Shenemar, as the apostle says, Avshalom lo hoy ish yafeh v'gomer. There was nobody as beautiful as Avshalom, uvegilcho, as Rosho, and when he would shave his head and get a haircut, v'yimiketz yom layom asher yigaleach. And I think once a year or whatever, he would get a haircut. I think we learned in Masechta Nosir that he was taka a Nazir Olam, I think, and he would, when Hich B'tzayir Mekil B'tzayir, right? And so every so often, from time to time, he would get a haircut. Kichaved Olav, because it was heavy upon him. V'gilcho, and he would get a haircut. V'shakal es Sar Reshe Masayim Shkolim Be'evan HaMelech, and the value of his hair was 200 kingly shekels. Alright. Tana Evan she Anshe Tveria v'Anshe Tzipori Shoklimba. It was when we're talking about these Evan HaMelech, it's the stones that the people of Tiberias and Tzipori weigh with. Lefichoch Nisla B'Sayir. So because he was so involved with his hair, so he got hanged by his hair. Shenemar, the apostle says, Vayikari Avshalom Lifnei Avdei David, that Avshalom happened upon the servants of David. Avshalom rochev ala perid. Avshalom was riding a mule. Vayove perid tachas sheva cha'ela agdola, and the mule walked beneath a large elm tree. Wait, this is the wrong word. Vayechezak. So I switched that word because it's wrong, and the Agos Sabach changes it to Vayechezak. Rosho be'ela, and his head got stuck in the elm tree. Vayuton ben hashemayim v'in haaretz, and he was poshet dangling between the heaven and the earth from his hair that got stuck in the tree. V'apered asher tachtov over, but the mule kept on moving. He was poshet, he was hanging by his hair. Shakal safsir ba lemifsike, so Avshalom took his sword and he was going to cut himself free. He was going to cut his hair, and said he can, not be hanging by his hair. Tanav Rabbi Yishmael, it was told in this message of Rabbi Yishmael, but also showed that at that time, Nivka Sha'ol Mitachtov, the abyss, hell, the depths opened beneath him, so cutting himself loose was no longer an option. Vayirgaz HaMelech, Vayal al Aliyas Hashar, Vayevk, and when King David heard about Avshalom's murder, right, that he was murdered, so he cried, V'cho Omar Belechto, and David HaMelech was saying, B'ni Avshalom, my son Avshalom, B'ni, my son Avshalom, Mi'iten Mosi Ani Tachtecha, if only I were to die in your place, Avshalom B'ni, Avshalom, my son. V'Hamelech Loat Esponov, and the King David wrapped his face, V'Yizak HaMelech Kol Gadol, and he cried out in a great cry, B'ni Avshalom, my son Avshalom, Avshalom B'ni, Avshalom, my son. Hani Tmanya B'ni Loma. How come King David said, bini, my son, 8 times. Shiva da'aski mishiva madori gehenim, 7 times that each one lifted him out from one cubicle or space of place in hell. V'idach, and with regard to the 8th bini, it caused his head to become closer to the rest of his body because I guess it was decapitated or something. Some say that the 8th bini was that after the 7 binis got Avshalom out of hell, the 8th one got him into the world to come. Avshalom lokach vayatz. How do you pronounce that word? Excuse me, Babylon. Vayetzev lo b'chayav. So it's so Avshalom established in his life. My lokach. What did he take? They took bad advice, bad guidance for himself. The pillar that was in the depths of the king, in the valley of the king, with the deep advice of the king of the world. The apostle says that the Eibishter had said to David Melech, okay, we're now on today's daf, on daf Yud Aleph Mid Aleph, that the Eibishter had said to King David after the incident with Bathsheba that something bad is going to come from your from your house, and that was Avshalom. Similarly, it says with regard to Joseph, that Jacob sent Joseph from the Emek, from the depths, from the valley of Chevin, Omer Reb Chanina bar Pape, Be'etza Amuka, in the deep advice, Shalosu Tzadik Shekaver B'Chevin, of the righteous individual who is buried in Chevin, i.e. Avram Avinu. The Chsiv, as the Pasuk says, by the Bus Ben HaBesorim, Yadoyateda Ki Geryeh Zaracha, that you shall know that your children will be aliens in a land that is not theirs, i.e. they will be a galus in Egypt, and therefore when Jacob sent Joseph to his brothers, it was setting in motion the descent to Egypt and the slavery and all of that. Ki Omar Ainli Ben, that Avshalom said he doesn't have a son. What? Avshalom didn't have any children? But the pasuk says, "Vayivoldu Avshalom shlosha banim uvas achas." Avshalom Taka had four children, 3 yingles and a maidel. Omar Rav Yitzchak bar Avdimi shelo haylo ben Hagun lamalchus. It says of Yitzchak bar Avdimi, enochinami, he had children, but none of them were fit to be king. Rav Chizde Omar. Okay, sounds like there's some activity happening next door. Rav Chizda Amar says, Rav Chizda, Gemire kol asoif tivoso shechaveru, if a fellow burns the produce, the grain of his friend, eino maniach ben liyorsho, well then he will not have any children to inherit him. Right? So it says so meaning, whereas Rav Yitzchak bar Avdimi said that, yeah, he had children, but they weren't fit to be kings. Rav Chizda said that all of his children died because Avshalom had burnt the grain of his fellow. V'yu kalei l'Yoav, that Avshalom burnt the wheat, the grain of Yoav. Tichsiv, as the pasuk says, Vayomer Lavadov, that Avshalom said to his servants, Ru'u chelkas Yoav el Yodi, see that this is the portion of, this is the field of Yoav next to me. Velo sham sorim, and he had barley dartin. Lechu v'etzisua ba'esh, go and burn the barley. V'etzisu avdei Avshalom esachelcha ba'esh, and sure enough, they burnt the plot in fire. So because Avshalom burnt Yoav's plot of barley, so that is why Avshalom's children died. So now the Gemara goes weiter in the Mishnah where it says V'chein le'inyan Tova Miriam v'chule. So we had just explained different things where it was midah connected midah negatively. We saw by Shimshin, we saw by Avshalom. Now we see that this also works for positive things. That there's midah connected midah in a positive light as well. But now, fact the Gemara, 1 second, midami, is it really? Are they really similar? Hasum chadashaita hacha shiva yome. It's not exactly midah connected midah when it comes to Miriam. Miriam watched after Moses when he was in the basket in the river, for however long that took. But then, not that long. It says what do you say? An hour. But over here, the Bnei Yisrael Taka waited for Miriam for 7 days. So that's not exactly a midah keneged midah. That's quite a bit more. So Amar Abaye says, Abaye ema uleini natova einokin. So Abaye says, actually what it should say is that when it comes to good deeds, it's not midah keneged midah. For bad things, it's midah keneged midah. For good deeds, it's not midah keneged midah. It's taka, you get much more. You get rewarded much better. Amar le Rave havechein leini natova katoni. But Rava says, but come on, Abaye, don't say it means. Don't say leinin hatova eino kain. It says v'chein leinin hatova. What do you mean? It says it's the same thing. Don't say that it's not the same thing. It says it is the same thing. So elo my Rave hachi katoni v'chein leinin hatova deba'osa mida. That what it means is that when it comes to goodness, so it's the same concept of what goes around comes around, right? That Miriam did something good, did a good deed for Moses, so they also did a good deed for her. But in terms of the quantity, but the fact of the matter is that yes, while it is what goes around comes around, that Miriam did something good for Moses, so the Bnei Yisrael did something good for Miriam, but they did quite a bit more good for Miriam, because when you do something good, you get rewarded much more than you did. That Miriam stayed from a distance to know what would happen to baby Moses. Rabbi Yitzchak says, that this entire verse is about the divine presence. When it says that she stood, it's like what the pasuk says, that the Eibishter came and he stood. Achoso, when it says his sister, say to knowledge that you are my sister. I think maybe that's a reference to the Torah. Meirachok, from a distance, meirachik Hashem nearly, as it says that from a distance the Eibishter appears to me. Ladeya, to know. So it says ladas, but I change it to ladeya because that's the pasuk. Tichsiv, the pasuk says, and also there's a note that says that Tichsiv kikel deos Hashem, that God is a God of knowledge. Ma, when the pasuk says ma, Tichsiv ma Hashem elikecha shoyel mimoch. What does the Eibishter ask from you? Ye'oseh Tichsiv kilo yaisa Hashem Elokim dover, that the Eibishter will not do, etc. But so we see that by yaisa it says Hashem Elokim, and lo Tichsiv vayikra loi Hashem shalom. So we see lo juxtaposed to God. So we see that entire pasuk can be connected in some way to the divine presence. This is a very, very famous Gemara. The pasuk says in the beginning of Parashat Shmos that there was a new king in town in Egypt who did not know Joseph. Rav Shmuel, so it's Taka Machlokus Rav and Shmuel. Chad Omar Chodosh Mamish v'Chad Omar Shenischadshuk Zeiroso. So one opinion is that it's Mamish a new king. Mamish a new king. The previous Paro died, and this is a new Paro, and this new Paro never heard of Joseph. But v'Chad Omar Shenischadshuk Zeiroso. The other opinion, however, is no, it's the same Pharaoh, but he had a change of heart. Manda Omar Chodosh Mamish Tichsiv Chodosh. So according to the opinion that it's Mamish a new king, it's exactly what it says. Ve'okum el Chodosh HaMatzar, who's a new king. Manda Omar Shenischadshuk Zeirosov Tlokziv Vayamos Vayimloch. And according to the opinion who says no, it was the same king, just that he had new policies. So why would you say that? Because it doesn't say anywhere Vayamos Vayimloch, and it doesn't say anywhere that the first Paro died and then a new Paro ruled. It doesn't say that. So mainly it's the same Paro, but just that he adopted new policies. Asher Yosef, and those policies did not recognize Yosef. Dehava domi kimandelo yodale klal. That Paro, right, he changed his policies, and just like that, he pretended like he had never heard of this guy, of Joseph. Vayomer el amo, and Paro says to his people, Am b'nei Yisrael, that the b'nei Yisrael, right, Rav Atzum Mimenu. He says that the b'nei Yisrael were becoming too too big and strong and too numerous, and in the Egyptian democratic elections, they would lose, and therefore they had to come up with a plan B. Sotah hu Israel ba'etza tchila. So Paro started with this whole mishigas. Lefichach lo katchila. That's why he got smitten first. Hu Israel ba'etza tchila. He started with this mishigas first. Tichsiv vayomer el amo, that he initiated with his nation, and he said to his nation, Lefichach lo katchila. That's why he was smitten first. Tichsiv, as the Pasuk says, uvchol va'amcho v'chol avadecha, that in you and in your nation and in all your servants there will be flogs. Havan ischak malo. Let us outsmart the Jews. Good strategy. Lohem miboile. So why does it say nischak malo? Let's outsmart him. It should say outsmart them. Omar Reb Chaim Reb Chanina. It says Reb Chaim Reb Chanina, bo v'nechkom l'mashiach she'Yisrael. Let us outsmart and outwit the Savior of Israel. B'menedonam. So what should we do? Right? I mean, they had to figure out. Okay, let us basically kill. Right? Nip it at the bud. Let us kill the future leader of Israel before he becomes a leader. Let's kill him. So how are we gonna do this? Nedunam ba'esh, if we're going to use fire, right? Because of course, what they ended up settling on, as we're going to see in a second, is water, right? That all of the Jewish boys would, and then ultimately maybe we'll see tomorrow, all the boys in Egypt, whatever it is, they would throw in and drown in the water. So first they were considered using fire, and burning in fire. So ksiv kinei Hashem ba'esh yavo. You can't use fire because the Eibishter will get in trouble. It says that God comes in fire. I don't want to mess with that. Ksiv ki ba'esh Hashem nishpat v'gomer. Hashem judges in fire. B'cherev. Maybe let's just chop off the heads of all the babies. Ksiv uv'chaybo es kol basar. But the pasuk says that with his sword against all flesh. We don't want to mess with that. Ela bo v'nadonam b'mayim. Let us judge these Jewish babies in water. Let's throw all the babies into the water and drown them. Because after all, the Eibishter swore that he would never again bring a deluge, a flood to the world. So we can do whatever we want with water, and there won't be any fear of repercussion. Shnema, as the pasuk says, right? That this pasuk says, describes that the Eibishter will never bring a flood against the entire world. V'hein ein and Yodin, but they didn't quite. They weren't quite smart enough. Shal kol ha'olam kulu eino mevi, aval uma achas hu mevi. It's true that the Eibishter won't wipe out the entire world with a flood, but he could wipe out a nation with a flood. Inami, alternatively, hu einu mevi aval hein boin v'noflim besocho. Alternatively, he may not bring a flood to destroy the world, but the people might drown themselves. After all, it says by the Egyptians, that the Egyptians were chasing after the Bnei Israel. They ended up in the Sea of Reeds, and they drowned there. So God didn't even need to bring a flood. They basically drowned themselves by running into the Red Sea, into the Sea of Reeds. And this is what Rabbi Elazar says. What does the pasuk mean? Ki badavar asher zadu aleim. So it means bekidera shebishlu ba nizbashlu, that ki badavar asher zadu. Let's go weiter for a second. My mashmadai zadu lishna dekiderahu. How do we know that zadu means like cooking? Dichsiv vayozed Yaakov nozid. That it says when Esau sold to Jacob, when Esau sold to Jacob the firstborn. So it says Vayozed Yaakov Nozid. Yaakov was cooking lentil soup, and it says Vayozed. So Vayozed means it means cooking. So Kibadav Asher Zodu Aleim means cooking, and Rabbi Elazar says that in the pot that the Egyptians cooked in, i.e., they killed Jewish babies in water. Ban is Bashlu. They themselves got cooked. They drowned in the Sea of Reeds. Amr B'chia Bar Abba, Amr B'simai, Shlosha Ayu Ba'osa Eitza, another famous Gemara, that there were three consultants who were consulted, right, that there were Abaye consulted with three individuals, Bilam, Ve'iyov, Ve'yisroi. Bilam, Eov, and Jethro. Bilam, Job, and Jethro. Bilam Shiatz Nerag. So Bilam, who advised Paro to go ahead with his plan, so Bilam was, of course, ultimately killed. Eov Sheshosak, Job, who was, he kept quiet, he didn't give an answer. Nidon B'Yisurin. So, of course, famously, Job experienced tremendous affliction. Yisro Shabarach, Yisro, who said, I don't want to have any part of this, and he ran away. So his descendants merited to sit in the office, in the chamber of the hewn stone, which is where the Sanhedrin would sit in the Beis Hamikdash. Mishpacha Sofrim Yosh ve'Yaibitz Tirosim Shimosim Suchosim Hema Kenim Haboy Machmas Avi Beis Rechev. So the important part was Kenim over there, and also the Sofrim Yosh ve'Yaibitz. That seems to be a reference to the Sanhedrin, and it says Kenim in that pasuk. Another pasuk says V'nei Keni Chosin Moshe v'Gomer, the children of Keni, the father-in-law of Moses, who of course was Yisro. So we see that Yisro's children merited to be part of the Sanhedrin. Now the Gemara says V'nucham banu v'olam min haaretz, that Paro was concerned that the Yidden that the Bnei Yisrael would fight, right? If they became so numerous, then they would, at least, if nothing else, have power of numbers, and they would be able to fight against us. Ve'olam min haaretz, and drive us out of the land. Ve'alinu mi ba'aleh. Why does it say ve'olah? It should say ve'alinu min haaretz, drive us. But it says and drive, right? It doesn't say drive us. It says and drive out. Drive who out? Amr Abba by Kahana Kadim Shemkal Atzmo V'Tola Kilosu B'Chavero. Basically, they were referring to themselves. Sure, ve'alinu, right? They're referring to themselves, but it's not nice to refer to yourself as I'm going to be driven out. So you like make it as if you're talking about your friend. It's euphemistic. Ve'asimu olav Sare misim alemi ba'alei, right? That they put taskmasters, right? The Egyptians put taskmasters on the Bnei Yisrael, but it doesn't say that. It says olav, on him. Sounds like it means on Paro. Tan devir Belazar b'Reb Shimon milamit she'eviu malbein v'talu lo lefaru b'tzavaro, that what they did was, right? Vayisimu olav, on him, on Paro, these taskmasters, they brought like some brick mold and hung it from his neck. And if any Jew tried to complain and said, I can't do the work, I'm too, I'm too finicky. So Amrulo, they would say to the Jew, Klum istinis ati yosemi Paro. What, are you more delicate and unable to work more so than Paro? Look, even Paro is, has a brick mold on his neck. Sorry, misim. When it says, misim, these taskmasters, davar shemesim, that which coerces, that they were there to coerce the Yidden to do their work. L'man anosu b'sivlosam, in order to afflict him in their work. Anosam mi b'aleh, it should be afflict them, right? The goal was to afflict the Jews in their slavery. So l'man anosu l'faru b'sivlosam d'Yisrael. No, it means to sort of anoso, to what's the word anoso? I don't know, to make him uncomfortable in the hard work of the Yid, meaning going back to this mold being hung on his neck, that he was like in some silly way involved as well. Even our misknos lefaro, that they built these cities for Pharaoh. Rav Shmuel Charamar shemisaknos is bailein. One of them says, "What's this misknos?" It means shemisaknos is bailein, that they're very dangerous business for their owners, for the Egyptians, because ultimately, on account of the slavery, they got in big trouble. Whereas the Chachamim v'Charamar, one of them says shemimaskinos is bailein, that they impoverish their owners. That we say, that anybody involved in building projects ends up becoming poor. As Pisom ves Ramses, Rav Shmuel Chadamar Pisom Shma. So the understanding here is that Pisom and Ramses were not two cities, rather they were one city. So one opinion is that the real name was Pisom. V'lama nikra Shma Ramses. So if it was called Pisom, then why do we call it Ramses? Sherishon Rishon Misroses, because these everything, all the work would just kind of fall apart. V'chadoma Ramses Shma, that really it's called Ramses, v'lama nikra Shma Pisom. So why was it called Pisom? Sherishon Rishon Pitahom Bolo, that they would sink into all the work would sink into the ground. Also, and as the Jews were, what's the word? Degraded, persecuted, maybe. As they were persecuted, so will they grow, and so will they multiply. It shouldn't be so will they grow, but it should be so did they grow. The more they were persecuted, the more did they grow. It's Ruach HaKodesh. It's Ruach HaKodesh was saying that the more you are afflicted, the more you will grow and flourish. Continues the Gemara, Vayakutsu mipnei bnei Yisrael mlamacha yudomin beineim kikotzim. That when the Pasuk says Vayakutsu, what does it mean? It's like coats is like a thorn. That the Yidden were like thorns in the to the Egyptians. Vayavidu mitzrayim es bnei Yisrael befarech. That the Egyptians enslaved and worked, subjugated the Jews to backbreaking work. Rabbi Elazar Omar Perach. So Rabbi Elazar understands parech not as backbreaking labor, but as perach, a soft mouth. That initially they convinced the Yidden to do work in soft tones, like, hey, come on, buddy old pal, give me a hand over here. The next thing you know, they're enslaved for 210 years. Rav Shmuel bar Nachmani Omer befricha, whereas Rav Shmuel bar Nachmani says no, there was no come on buddy old pal. It was all it was tachlis, it was backbreaking labor. That they embittered the lives of the Jews with hard work and bricks and mortars. Says Rava that it started out with mortar and bricks, but then it became all sorts of field work, and any terrible work was what the Jews were responsible to do. That all of their work, this backbreaking work, that they would switch work that was traditionally done by women, they would give to the men to do, and the work that was traditionally done by men was given to the women to work to do. Everybody had to work on things that they didn't know how to do. Now earlier, Rabbi Elazar's opinion was that befarech means beperach, that they initially came and they said, hey buddy old pal, why don't you give me a hand? But according to this opinion, right, when it comes to here, Avidu, where am I? It's called that everybody agrees that means backbreaking labor. Darish Rav Avira Darshan B'schar noshim tzidkonios, on account of the righteous women, Shayu Ba'oso Ador, in that generation, Nigalu Yisrael Mitzrayim, on account of the Noshim Tzidkonios, the Yidden were redeemed from Egypt. That when the women would go to draw water, HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mezamiloim Dogim Ketanim Bichadeim, the Eibishter would arrange for them that into their jugs would flow small fish. And when they would take their jug out of the water, it was filled 50% with water and 50% with fish. And then they would heat them up on the fire. In one pot there was hot water, in the other pot there was fish. And then they would take this food, these meals that they prepared, out to their husbands who were enslaved in the field. And with the hot water they would bathe their husbands, and anoint them with oils, and they would give them the food, the fish and drinks, and then they would have relations in the fields between the borders. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, Im tishkifun ben shvasayim v'gomer, if you will lie among the borders, Bischar tishkivun ben shvasayim zoch Yisrael levizas Mitzrayim, and in reward of what happened there on the borders of the field, the Yidden were merited to the booty of Egypt. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, Kanfiyona nechba b'kesev v'avoseh b'yirak v'acharutz, like the wings of the dove that are covered in silver, and its pinions with brilliant gold. And when these women would get pregnant, they would go home. And when it became time to give birth, they would go and give birth in the field, under apple trees. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, that underneath the apple tree I roused you. And because they were giving birth alone in the field, so under the apple tree, so God would send an angel from the high heavens, to clean and straighten out the baby. Just like a midwife would, straightens out the baby. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, that those who gave birth to you, lo karas sharech, there was no way to cut the umbilical cord, uvmaim lo ruchatz, and you were not washed in water, lemishi v'gomer umelaket. But there were these angels who would help them out. And these angels would provide 2 round loaves, one round loaf of oil, another round loaf of honey. That I guess they were nursed with honey from rocks, and as well as oil from rocks. But then when the Egyptians would find out that this was taking place, so those Egyptians would come to kill these Jews. But a miracle happened, and the babies who were just born, the infants, would be absorbed into the ground, and then these Egyptian nudniks would come with oxen and plow on top of the ground in the hope of killing these babies who were absorbed into the ground. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, Al gabi chorshu chorshim v'gomer, that on top of me there were plows, la'achar sheholchin, and then after these Egyptians would go away, these babies would emerge from the ground like grass. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, that the myriads would come out, were like the growth of the field. And then when these babies would grow up, they would come in flocks and flocks to their homes. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, that you got bigger, and you came with all sorts of ornaments. Don't say with all sorts of ornaments, rather say it means in flocks and flocks. And when the Eibishter was revealed at the Sea of Reeds, these babies who experienced this miracle as infants, they immediately recognized the Eibishter at the Sea of Reeds. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, Zekeli vanveu, this is my God, and I will glorify Him. And Pharaoh said to the Jewish midwives, Rabbi Shmuel Chadomer Isho Vita v'Chadomer Kal Vachmosa. So Machlokes Rav and Shmuel. One opinion is that it was a mother and daughter duo. The other one was that it was a mother and daughter-in-law. There was a mother-in-law, daughter-in-law duo. Man de Omar Isha Uvita Yocheved and Miriam. If you say that it was a mother-daughter duo, it's Yocheved and Miriam. Uman de Omar Kal Vachmosa. And if you say that it was a daughter-in-law and a mother-in-law, Yocheved Elisheva. It was Yocheved and her daughter-in-law Elisheva, who is married to Aharon. Tani, we learn in a brisa, Command Omar Isha Uvita. We learn in a brisa that supports the opinion that it was a mother-daughter duo. Ditanis, within the Brisa, Shifra zo Yocheved, that Shifra, right, it says that the two midwives were Shifra and Pua. So Shifra is Yocheved, V'lo nikra shma Shifra, shemishaperes es avolot, that Shifra is Yocheved, and the reason why she was called Shifra is because she's mishaperes es avolot, she straightens out the newborn baby. Shifra sheparu v'ravu yisrael b'yameh. Alternatively, Shifra, because the Yidden multiplied in her days on account of her work. Pua zo Miriam, and Pua is Miriam. Pua, how come she's called Pua? Poa, because she would coo the newborn babies, which I guess is a thing that you do with newborn babies to engage the baby. Okay. Alternatively, she was called Pua because she would see into Ruach HaKodesh, divine spirit for Omeris, and she said, that in the future my mother is going to give birth to a child who will save the Bnei Yisrael. Vayomer, now Paro had said to the midwives, that when you give birth to, that when you birth the Jewish women, you have to kill their babies. My avonim of Naim, right? So it says, right? So Paro had said to Shifra and Pua, right? He had said that when you are birthing the Jewish woman, and it says, right, and you're by the Ovnaim. So my Ovnaim, what are Ovnaim? Amar Chonon Simin Gadol Moser Loen, that Paro gave a sort of a trick, gave over some fancy secrets to Shifra and Pua, which was Amar Loen. He said to them, B'shasha Koraz Leiled, that when a woman is about to give birth, right, she might be in labor for a long time, but when it's about to happen, her thighs become cold like stones. And that's what it means, Allah of Naim, that he was basically telling Shifra and Pua that that's how you know when she's about to give birth. The East Amr, those who say Kedichsiv, the pasuk says, Va'ered beis hayotzer, that I went down. What was this in Yechezkel? In Yirmiyah, it says that I went down to the craftsman, V'hinehu osa melacha ala ovnoim, and he was doing work on the ovnaim, on like a stone chair, right? And in this respect, the ovnaim is like the birthing stone that the women would sit on when they were giving birth. My yotzer zeh yarich mikan v'yarich mikan v'saden be'emtza, and just like a craftsman when he's working, so he's working with one leg to the right, one leg to the left, and the block that he's working on in the middle. So Afisha, also a woman who's giving birth on a birthing stone, yarich mikan v'yarich mikan v'avolid be'emtza, one thigh to the right, one thigh to the left, and the baby in the middle. Im benu v'amiten, also if the child is a yingul, if the child is a boy, you must kill the child. Or Mebchanino simin gadol maser loen, that Paro gave them a trick. Ben ponav lamata bas poner lamalo, that a boy is born with his face downwards and a girl is born with the face upwards. But Shifra and Pua, the midwives, they feared God. They did not do as Paro had said. Lohen miboy lei, right? 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 They didn't do that which the king of Egypt said alein, but shouldn't it say lohen? Shouldn't it say to them? Why does it say alein, on them? So Amar Rabbi Yossi Bab Chanina Malabit Shetivon Lidvar Avera V'lo Nisbu. It means that Paro wanted to sleep with Shifra and Pua, but they did not allow it. And they enlivened the infants. Tana lo dayan shlo hemisu oson ela shoyu maspikos loen maim umazun. That Shifra and Pua didn't just save these infants; they actually supported them. They gave them water and food. V'tomarna amiyaldos el parlo kilo kanoshim v'gomer. The Shifra and Pua, the midwives, said to Paro, "Look, what can you expect from us? the Jewish women are not like the Egyptian women. My chayos, right? It says that the Jewish women are chayos. What does chayos mean? It means like a midwife, that every Jewish woman is also a midwife. But still, but even a midwife who's giving birth still needs another midwife to assist. So even if you say that all the Jewish women are midwives, that wouldn't mean that they're birthing themselves. Elo, amrulo, they said to Paro, Umazo kichaya nimshula, that this nation is compared to wild beasts. Yehuda gur aryeh, Yehuda is compared to a lion. Don Yehidan nachash, Don is compared to a snake. Naphtali ayala shlucha, Naphtali is like a deer. Yisachar chamagarim, Yisachar is like a donkey. Yosef bechor shor, Yosef is like an ox. Binyamin zev yishav, Binyamin is like a wolf. Tichsivbei, ksivbei, udlo ksivbei, ksiv. Now, we just gave examples of shvatim about whom it compares them to a beast. But what about the ones that weren't there, right? For example, Shimon, right? Shimon wasn't there. So ma'imcha levi ben arayu sovtza v'gomer. But there's sort of an umbrella clause where it basically compares all of the tribes of Israel to a line. Vayihi ki yoram yaldos es elokim v'yaslem botim. So therefore, they were saying that the Jewish women are like chayas; they can just basically take care of themselves. Vayihi ki yoru am yaldos es elokim. That when the midwives feared God, vayaslem botim, He made for them houses. Rav Shmuel chad omar. Bate kuna v'levia v'charoma bate malchus. So again, Machlokas Rav and Shmuel. One opinion is that they were given houses of Kohen and Levi, right? Of course, Kahuna and Levia comes from Aharon and Moshe. V'charoma bate malchus, and one of them says, well, I guess Levi. Kahuna comes from Aharon, and Levium comes from Shevet Levi. Manda Omar Bate Kahuna v'Levia. Wait, what? Where am I? Chadam Bate Malchus. Manda Omar Bate Kahuna Levia Aharon and Moshe. Okay, so that's Aharon and Moshe who are Kohanim and Levium. Manda Omar Bate Malchus David Nami Miriam Kasi. And if you say it means that refers to the house of kingship, because David came from Miriam. It says that Kalev married Ephras, who is Binyamin. Vateled lo es Chur, and Chur was born from them. David ben ish Ephrasi v'gomer, and David was from a man of the son of a fellow from Ephrat. So you see that Miriam is referred to Ephrat, and David is referred to as a person from Ephrat. So we see that David came from Miriam, so we see that Malchus was from her. Friends, that was daf Yud Aleph of Masechta Sotah. That was a very big daf, a lot of interesting agaritas, first about Avshalom, and then about Miriam, and then we got into Yetzias Mitzrayim, some famous Gemaras, like was there Mamash a new Paro, or was it just that he changed his policies? We saw the famous Gemara about Bilam, Eov, and Yisro, and how Paro consulted with them about what to do about the Jews. We saw also super interesting, and about Shifra and Pua and the Gezerah of Paro on the Jews. All sorts of interesting agaritas on Daf Yud Aleph of Masechta Sotah. Hope you enjoyed. Peace out.